Welcome to Lift Your Legacy. My name is Jacob Rupp, father, husband, and rabbi. And each week we bring you an inspiring person or message to help you unlock your inner potential and create change that will impact the future. Thank you for listening, and let's get to it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. I am thrilled to have on Adam Ward, who is a coach and consultant and author, best-selling author with over 25 years of experience in product development and efficiency. He works with the biggest companies around the world, Honda, the U.S. military, GE, large healthcare companies, and helps them learn efficiency and how to simplify their lives and create more innovative products. So that's one component of what he does, and it's really fascinating. He's also an ultra marathoner and himself, a father with 3 children, and the idea of how do you get all of this stuff done and still go around in the world is really fascinating. But our interview takes an interesting turn in we start to discuss how religion can innovate and how people can utilize and why people should utilize religion in order to find more meaning and get a creative edge, and the benefits of a religious involvement is to individuals. So this is an area that's absolutely fascinating for me. Obviously, I'm very interested in it because I myself am someone who is consistently advocating for spiritual development when it comes to your personal life, your business life, your relationship life, etc. But it's interesting to hear how an engineer and an efficiency expert looks at and recognizes that this is a very fundamental problem, both on a personal level for those people that have not developed their spiritual centers, and also the institution of religion as a whole. Some major statistics that come out is the fact that 66% of the population develops their whole spirituality before they're 16 years old, I believe. So that's interesting. So it's like, most people go through their whole adult life. Only one third of the population seriously consider religion as they get older. So the reason why I think this is so important is that if we want to live meaningful lives, we have to really radically reconsider how we look at spirituality, how we look at the role of religion, and what role it has in our own life. And I speak with Adam from his engineer, from his scientific, from his business perspective, why that's also important. I just wanted to say for the podcast, I appreciate everyone listening tremendously. We don't do a lot of advertisements on here. So, this is really just to provide value for you. And I would love your feedback. If this is valuable, if you're learning more information for this, please reach out on all of the different social platforms that we're on, Facebook and YouTube and you name it, LinkedIn and Instagram, all of the above. And just tell us what do you think about this episode? Again, we're going to go in a little bit of a different route besides the traditional self-development, business development, leadership, and we're going to get into religion to a certain extent and how that helps. So I'd be very curious your feedback, and I appreciate it. With no further ado, Adam. Adam, thanks so much for joining us today. One of the amazing parts that's popped out of your bio, besides the incredible companies that you worked with, is how you're always focusing on how big companies can accomplish their goals by trying to simplify what they're doing. So maybe if you can give me a little bit of background in terms of this theme in your life, how you got really good at helping people simplify and why it's important to simplify.
Well, I watched a video recently with Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, and the title of the video was "Busy is the New Stupid." And I found it resonated well with what I've seen in practice. And people have a tendency now to just be getting their hands in too many things, and large corporations especially, they've got chat software that goes on their computers. They've got the email that's sending them 100+ emails a day. They've got a initiatives list or project list that's nearly infinite, and it really helps to simplify everything down at work and at home. Focus and getting the target few that you need, things that you need to work on, really helps.
Do you feel that people lose a competitive advantage if they're sort of working in mid-level management or kind of on the product line where they need to be so connected to everyone all the time? Or is all of this stuff kind of clutter that we have to sort of cut out of our life?
Yeah, I think the connected all the time is a myth. If we have a boss or if we have an employee that requires being connected nonstop, then we're either not managing down well or we're not managing up well. And we should have periods of the day where we can go through without having to look at our phone, without having to look at our computer, and we can get a lot of stuff done. So yes, with the digital natives that are born and entering the workforce, their phone is glued to their hand. You can go on a metro or an airplane before it takes off, and everyone's looking at their phone, and a lot of stuff, work you can't get done on your phone, and we need to learn to put that thing down, and we need to learn to close email programs and focus on what the deliverables are for that hour or for that day.
Are companies supposed to set this as a culture? Like, for example, like when you're looking to work with a company, are you seeing that you're trying to change the focus of the company? Do you have to speak from a top-down level? Is this a general problem that just modern people have where we're just like too networked and too connected? Or is there some kind of like a specific change that can be made in terms of creating a culture of simplicity?
Yeah, I think the big thing is FOMO, right? It's the fear of missing out. It's what opportunity are we going to miss if we're not paying attention? And whether that's a comment that's on a Facebook page or whether that's an email where the boss is asking for something, we're really checking that to make sure that we're missing out. So I see it at every level. The CEO, if they're a micromanager or if they're somebody that really likes to control things, they put a disproportionate amount of time in each of their days because they don't trust their employees to deliver. And the same goes with people at the bottom. They're so worried that their manager's not going to think that they're a good performer if they're not instantaneously responsive. That they monitor that as well. So I think it's very tricky, and the pace of society seems to reward those who are busy, but it's actually the opposite. I find those who dedicate and take time aside to think, put big blocks in their calendar that are empty, actually get more done.
Okay, so now I have to ask, I think this is the awkward question, which is that you're an ultra marathoner, you have 3 children, you're an author, you have a company that's working with big clients. So how do you do that when you're starting your day or starting your week? What are some of the hacks or strategies that you use to make sure that you show up? Clearly physical health is very important for you. Clearly you're a family man. You have to have time to write. You have to have time to work. So how do you do all of this stuff?
Yeah, we all get 24 hours a day, right? That's the currency that's equal for everyone. And, so I've had a lot of questions recently to me about daily productivity. And what I tell everyone is you've got to find the time of day where you're most work productive. And maybe that's 7 to noon, maybe that's noon to 6 p.m., whatever time that is. And it's not usually going to be 8 hours. Mm-hmm. And if you have 8 hours of work, then you're probably putting some meetings in there. But to crank through a mental energy on 8 hours for a professional job is really tough. So I try to say find a 5 or 6 hour block where you're very, very effective. And then if you're focused, you should be able to get all that needs to get done in that time. And then you'll have time for your calls, or your meetings, or whatever on top of that. I wrote my bestseller by dictating to the phone while I was driving. So, I didn't sit down, I didn't type it. I used the speech to text function and smartphone and actually wrote that whole draft using that. So I double up on things that I can. And, in the winter I work out in my basement. So I've got my computer there if I need to do stuff. In the summer, it's a little more difficult because I'm outside, but I try to make double use of workout time. And then as far as the family,
yeah,
I use a hack, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman.
Yeah.
And so, if it's quality time's one of them, then when I'm with them, I make sure it's quality. If it's gifts or if it's acts of service, whatever it is, each of my kids, my wife, I try to focus on that. And it pays good multiples when you're focused on that.
It's fascinating. Are you still actively working on developing yourself? Because one thing that came out of the interview that we conducted over Authority Magazine and in Thrive Global was that you were quoting quite a few, John Maxwell and all kinds of other books about, living a productive life, managing workflow and everything like that. So how do you look at your own ongoing development, and what are some of the major sources that you utilize in order to become, as cutting edge as you can be?
Wow, that's that's a tough question. I'm curious by nature, so anytime I see something that I want to learn, I pick it up and I study it. And depending, I'd say probably about half of my development is work related or problem related, meaning there's something I need to solve, and I'm trying to find a solution for it. And one of the things that I do is I go outside of the industry. I think when we're inside of an industry and we're looking at what they're doing, we're copying what everyone does. So if I'm in healthcare, I want to go to manufacturing. If I'm manufacturing, I want to look at automobile. Or I want to look at fashion. So I have a bunch of different magazines that I read. I listen to probably 20 podcasts a week, variety of different topics. And then if I see a book, I mean, the leadership stuff is good. So if someone does a new, fresh twist on a topic, I'll pick it up and I'll read it. My preferred way is Audible. So I can go through a lot of Audible books, during the summer when I'm, riding my bike for 3 hours or 4 hours.
One thing that I notice a lot with your career trajectory is that you've been successful in quite a few different areas. If it's, the R&D with Honda, to healthcare, to the, advice in the Air Force, to being an author, to the ultramarathon. Are there like basic themes now that you've seen such a broad variety of different organizations and institutions that carry through, where you don't necessarily have a fear of embarking on a new endeavor because of you sort of know that these are how things are going to work? Or is there like a fear each time you try something new and there's that learning curve and you just have to get used to it?
Yeah, and you're right. I have worked in several industries, and in my current role as consulting, I've probably been in 10 plus different industries. And the higher up I go, and the more strategic it gets the conversation, the more similar it is. And when I went to my publisher for my book, I looked at her bookshelf. It was at a trade show, and I said, "What do you wish you had on there?" She goes, "Well, we don't have anything on this topic," and which really surprised me because I thought, anyone can write about development in healthcare, and but the healthcare people, they wanted it written in healthcare language. So the thing that I find most is in an industry, I have to learn it enough where I don't look silly in the C-suite. And I have a tendency to ask a ton of questions when I'm meeting with clients, and then I regurgitate that information back to them. And then again, back to the curiosity. And it doesn't matter if I take up fishing as a hobby, I want to know everything about how to catch a fish, or if I'm seeing birds in my backyard, I want to see what species are, around. So for me, I like to learn. And I think that if you're working across multiple industries, however much you like to learn is going to contribute to your success. But then also the higher you go, the more similar it is. I mean, there's really not much of a difference at the CEO level.
Well, that's very interesting. So just to reiterate what it sounds like, what I'm hearing you say is that the specifics to sound like what you're talking about in every industry that you have to acquire with each new thing that you go into. But the people that are struggling in the Air Force are in terms of the leadership are going to have the same stuff that you were dealing with when you were working with GE or Honda or any of those other big companies. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've worked with the military several times, the Navy and the Air Force, and, whether it's putting bombs on a fighter jet in the middle of Nevada, or whether it's designing a new medical clinic in rural North Carolina, they're still worried about budget. They're still worried about getting it on time. They're still worried about serving their customers while demand hits. They have different words for everything. They want to be battle ready, or they want to be war ready in the military, where, if we look at the commercial side, it's like, hey, we want to make sure that we have all of our stuff available for purchase, Wall Street's expectations, and all of that stuff. So it's just where the focus is and what's driving it. But yeah, cost and timing is a big deal with everyone.
One of the things that really stuck out and was kind of threw me for a loop at the end of our interview in the magazine was your desire to change how religion and Christianity was used across the scale. And I'm a rabbi, and I happen to think that also that the incredible power and transformative influence that religion has. At the same time, if you look at the world and you look at, there's a lot of breakdown. So maybe develop, if you could, for me, a little bit about how your own spiritual and religious practices have been shaped by business and how you could change things if you could, and your general thoughts about that.
Yeah, sure. So the religion if I talk with leaders in the religious sector, or churches, or they have the same, hey, but typically there's a higher being. So, if the religions that believe in a God, they have both the access to him, and they have the responsibility to him. And so that can be a supernatural hack for those of us who do have a faith in a higher power that others don't have. And so, when I look at the institutions that are out there and I see them using the same techniques that are hundreds of years old, and this is separate from the fact that the scripture doesn't change, right? We believe in the scripture never changes, but the techniques to get people to learn that scripture have to change. And I've got a church behind me, probably 200 yards just outside of our neighborhood, and the bells go off twice a day. And when I drive by it on Sunday morning, there's probably 25 cars in the parking lot. And I know that at some point that was the center of this community 150 years ago, but it hasn't. And there's no reason for it not to be, because of all of the benefits you get from having a relationship, with a higher power, and, kind of giving your life over to that.
Do you feel like religion is becoming more irrelevant, more relevant? Like, how do you feel like the path is going? And what are some of the things that those people that are practitioners of the religion, or people that are trying to make it relevant, what are some of the things that they can use? And like, is that borrowed from, a consumer culture? Is it borrowed from the kind of corporations and their strategies? How do you see that going? Yeah,
that's a great question. If we look at research done by Barna, I'll just focus on the United States here for a second. If we look at research done by Barna Group, they have seen a steady decline in the participation in organized religion in the U.S., certainly over the past several decades. Fewer people want to be associated with faith. Fewer people actually believe the core principles that are associated with those faiths. And so when we look at, scientifically done research, not a couple samples pulled here or there from the media, it is a trend that is a bit scary.
Scary. Why is it scary that religion and organized faith, so to speak, is sort of disappearing from the American scene? Why does that bother you?
Well, I mean, I besides the fact that the whole afterlife and where people end up, I think a lot of if we even look at fundamental Judaism and the behaviors that are expected out of us, and what things are considered good and what things are considered acceptable, most countries have that. I mean, most companies have that in their ethics policies. And, I think the further away we get from religion, we'll start to see those go away. And my guess is we'll probably see bigger businesses getting in trouble for things. We'll see business leaders getting held accountable because there's media everywhere. In everyone's pocket there's a video camera. And, eventually people will get, it'll catch up to them what they're doing in the back rooms. And so I think the further away we get from religion, the less business can perform and the more dishonest businesses will get. Just drifting, not intentionally doing it. And then, also personally, I get I'll call it a supercharge out of my involvement in a religious context that drives me on a daily basis.
So that's very interesting. So to reiterate what I think I'm hearing you say is that, and it's funny because there was a whole firestorm that came out very recently about the president speaking about bringing Bible study back into public school. And this was actually a point that I made was very much in line with what you had just said, which is, it's like, look, we're trying to raise the next generation, and religious values, even if you so to speak, divorce them from the Bible itself about, equality before God, and, principles of charity and principles of justice and principles of all of these things. This is good for society. And by kind of cutting out that component of it, you're on a slippery slope as a society. So that's point number one. You're saying also from a performance standard, you feel that your religious connection makes you more successful at the things that you are doing. Is that fair to say?
And I would say probably what I find the difference difference in a lot of the conversations that I have with colleagues is I'll have a piece around work. That's not an explainable one. And instead of getting worked up on stuff or, instead of, fearing things, I don't know, I just get a piece. And I think that's unfair over, some of my, colleagues, but, that's because of my involvement, and everyone can have that. It's available to people, but I think that's one of the easy things that I see on a day-to-day basis.
Why do you have a certain level of peace going around your work?
People always say is, why are you smiling so much? I'm like, I
Okay.
don't know why I smile so much. I mean, it's just, I'm happy. I enjoy my life, and, and I'd like to attribute it to my religious involvement.
So you're saying because of your connection to God and seeing that you're, I guess you could say, a piece of him, and that there is ultimate justice in the world, and all of these basic principles that we need for happiness, you're saying that it is actually helping you. And when you compare it to other people that don't have this level of connection, then you feel like in a way they're missing out from the happiness that people could have.
Right. That's exactly right.
How does a person who is built like you, someone that's an engineer, start to buy into things that we can't see, or, ancient principles that were written many, many years ago that haven't changed? Like, you're at the corner, of innovation, and here you're getting your peace of mind from stuff that's thousands of years old.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things that, just within the past few years, I reconcile. And although I've been, religious most of my life, I went and I studied deep for about a year, and and I ignored all the stuff I learned as a kid, threw it all away, said, I'm going to start from scratch, and I'm going to go look at the science side, and I'm going to go look at the religious side. And, I started to reconcile the two. And, with the absence of faith, it's easy for us to reject some of that stuff, as there isn't, enough scientific evidence. But then how do you explain the feelings you get, the opportunities you get? How do you, explain the peace you have, or the joy you have, or the resolutions that seemed impossible? And there is no science behind that. And, whether it's a butterfly flapping its wings in the Amazon, that affected it here. It's just, I don't know. I found it silly to believe on coincidence, even though I have a scientific approach. And I couldn't dismiss all of the personal things that had happened in my life that there wasn't a scientific explanation for.
It's a very interesting point. And I think also crucial is this idea. And I'm not sure if there was a time in your life, it was like your kids were a certain age, or you'd reach a certain point in your career. But what you said, I think, is so crucial, because a lot of people get the basic, whatever you want to call it, indoctrination that they have as children. Mm-hmm. And as their mind matures and they learn more, again, you go to college, you learn philosophy, you learn science, you learn engineering, math, whatever it might be. So you can develop a certain level of sophistication in other things just because you know about it. But the religious connection, it still stays a five-year-old's understanding of it. So would you advise a person, is there a certain time of life when it's most advantageous to really kind of go back to the drawing board and say, okay, so like, what do I really believe in here? Or is it just like whenever you can, whenever you realize this, like start figuring out what you actually believe?
66% of the people that come to faith do it before age 14.
That's fascinating.
So after 14, there's only a third of the group that come to some type of faith. And so
is that just Christian? Is that America? What is that? What is that? Where was that?
That's America. Yeah.
Fascinating. So you're saying 2/3 of the people are so again, after 15, you're saying that most people are more or less lost to religion if they haven't made that commitment early on. Is that what you're saying?
Right. So it's tough for an adult, but then it's also tough for a child to go back and say, what is truth? And very few people will go back to the original literature or let alone the original Hebrew or Greek, whatever language it was your scripture was written in, and find out what it really meant, and not a translated English version. So to do that requires a deep study, so I think it's good for any adult that starts to question it to dig into it, because there's so much out there that's supportive of what it was as a child, but different.
It's fantastic. I love asking these questions from you because again, I say very similar things, but I feel like people think there's a lot more of a emotional baggage on my part. Now, I'm curious then if the case is it's like the data says that the best way to get people to buy in is to focus on the youth. And once a person's already grown up, they have to take personal responsibility. At least that's certainly the path that I took in my life. That sounds like the path that you took in your life. What can big institutions do, or maybe that big institutions are over as a movement in America? I mean, what can the big institutions do in order to present religion as being relevant and life enhancing, and not sitting empty on a Saturday or Sunday, whatever it might be, and everyone else is playing golf or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I mean that's $1 million question, right?
Probably more than that, I think.
Yeah,
it is big business.
Yeah. Well, there's 7 billion people on the earth, so whatever each person's life is worth, that's a lot of money. I think the big thing with institutions is understand that there are segments, and we can't take a one-size-fits-all approach. Just like if we go to a restaurant and for breakfast, we're going to choose one type of restaurant or the other. And I'm not saying pick one religion or the other. I'm saying even if you focus on one specific religion, there's going to be different varieties of it. And generational, or whether you go personality type, some people are going to be more attracted to even paying attention. Someone may be very comfortable in a building that's got stone walls with stained glass windows. Other people maybe want a converted warehouse. Mm-hmm. But I think beyond that, once we get past the superficial piece of it, I think a lot of places gotten away from the core doctrine and the fact that there is a all-powerful being that actually wants to have a relationship with us and wants our lives to be good. And there's so many things that have been out there on controlling people or manipulating people, or the thou shalt nots, and it really is to me empowerment. And I think there's a lot of abuse that has happened with religion in the past, and there's a very fine line. We should preach from, or speak from, or share from, or really be about what it'll enable us to do, as opposed to what it's keeping us from doing.
And are you finding that, and I'm not sure if you do a lot of work with clergy or with different institutions, but are you finding that the people coming out of the education systems are not equipped with this kind of information? Because again, for me, when I'll speak to younger rabbis or other people that are in similar businesses, I feel like I have to give them a basic understanding of marketing and sales. And again, it's in a way, it sounds very bad to be selling and marketing a religion, but on the other hand, it's like what you just said, that's the fundamentals of sales. Like what are you offering this person? Why is a person going to want to buy into what you have? Marketing is, well, what do they like? You know what I'm saying? It's like, don't give them something they don't like. Figure out what they're looking for. Again, it doesn't mean to change and manipulate and to water down, which I think is absolutely crucial.
Right.
But there should be enough, I'm going to say there is enough within a religion to appeal to someone based on what their genuine interests are. And I think that's important.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think, if we look at any person coming out of high school or any person coming out of college, we consider them entry level. And most of the jobs that we have out in the world, they enter the training force at that point. And we don't actually consider them good until 5-7 years into their job. And so I think a lot of the ones that are coming out, especially ones that aren't going deeper, aren't getting a master's in their field or a PhD in their field, they have a gap on the doctrine side, or a gap on the leadership side. And some of them aren't under a leaders that can actually teach them those principles. They're running a weekend service, and that's what they're expected to do, or a prayer group. And they really need a holistic approach to how to deliver religion to the community that they're in. And so I see a few good examples of it. If I look at Columbus, the city I live in, and we've got, about 1,100 religious institutions in our 7-county area. There's probably 50 that do things well. And so that's a small percentage compared to the overall number.
So it needs a lot of work, I guess, is the idea. Amazing. Adam, please tell us a little bit more. I really appreciate the time. Please tell us a little bit more about how we can follow you and hear about the cool stuff that you're doing, get your books, your newest projects, etc.
Yeah, sure. I'm most active on LinkedIn. If you just type in Adam Ward Innovation, yeah, you can find me, or on Twitter, ADZ_MIKL. That's Ads Michael, ADZ_MIKL. I do have my website, AdamMWard.com. And so one of those three things, it's easy to get a hold of me, and I'm always publishing and stuff out there and letting know where I'm speaking or what's going on next.
Amazing. Adam, thank you so much.
There you have it, folks, another inspiring episode. If you enjoyed this, I ask you to please share this with your friends and to like us over on Rabbi Rupp through Facebook or on YouTube. And the more that we're able to get these important messages out, the more that we can really make an impact in the world. So I encourage you, please, to stay tuned. We have a ton of amazing speakers coming up, and also to tell your friends about it. Thank you very much.